to the first weekend wrap of the 2025 AFL season. After a little bit of nice skits and nice stuff done over the off-season, it's good to get back into the analytical points of view for the overall games and run down all the weekend games quickly. And again, if you want to see more of this content, like and subscribe to the channel. But we begin in Geelong with Geelong versus Fremantle, and this game was expected to be a relatively close one, close affair. Freo have come into Geelong a few times over the past few years and shocked the Cats. Well, not today. Not on Saturday. Geelong just said, no. No, we're pretty tired of what you've done to us over the last few years, and we're gonna take our own business. They were clinical in the midfield, like their midfield looked so insane and so good. Like Max Holmes is ready to take the leap of the next player and just jump into another level of his play. But the big story for the Cats was the debut of Bailey Smith, obviously, and he looked like the early recruit of the year. Much to the chagrin of most other AFL fans, he looked phenomenal and looked like he was ready to take over this game. Well and truly, and just put on a show in so many different ways. Like, he was getting disposals, and when he got disposals, they were leaning towards goal before finally kicking a goal of his own late in the fourth quarter. He was phenomenal, and it was a warning sign of what he can do for the rest of the competition. And the Cats also just clinical with their defense, and the Dockers just never looked like scoring whatsoever. So yeah, I think a big theme you'll be seeing throughout this video is statement wins. Early on, teams put up a statement victory and planted their flag on the competition, and Geelong certainly did that, poising themselves for another insane successful year. Freo, on the other hand, were a massive disappointment. Their defense was lethargical. Their forward 50 entries just looked terrible, and it looked like every time it was going to get marked by Mark Luxards and Jack Henry. And other than an insane transitional period from Murphy Reid, which he is going to be a star, already love what I see from the kid, they just did not challenge at Geelong at all in this game. In particular, Andrew Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong were not good at all. So yeah, lots of stuff to learn about your Dockers, lots to lick your wounds from, and they'll have to pick themselves up again and get back to where they started from as Sydney come to Optus next week in a tough challenge after getting brutally demoralised and just not looking tough enough against Geelong. So overall, massive win for the Cats, who put an absolute statement on the competition early. Next game we'll be talking about is Sydney versus Brisbane. The grand final rematch and the true opening game for the Sydney Swans. Brisbane were complaining of a stupid opening round, but you know, Alfred happened, which prayers up to everyone who has been suffering through that. But overall, it was a very bounce back and forth type of game early on. Sydney's defense was doing an incredible job to hold up Brisbane and make them really panic, which was insinuated when Kyle Logan went down with injury early in the first quarter. I thought Nick Blakey's run up half back was phenomenal, and Sydney were just taking control of the game early and possessing tempo in a very Sydney Swan style way. But Brisbane are a team that we know that doesn't mind adversity and is able to bounce back from adversity incredibly well. And that is what I thought that this game was like. Lachie Neale had a very terrible game. He had one of the worst games of his career, yet Brisbane still ended up just fighting possession, being able to get off half back and find scores like they do. And in the fourth quarter, I thought the key possession winner and the key player who really broke this game open was Dane Zorko. Being able to find possessions off half back and kick some crucial goals right when the Lions needed it. And I was just thinking the whole time, like, imagine if this was the actual grand final. Like, it would have been so much better than overall what we actually ended up getting, which was a blowout, obviously, last year. But obviously, Sydney, like, had their chances, but I feel like their forwards just struggled to fire late with Tom McCartan and who, ironically, was sent to down and back in the last quarter to try and curb Brisbane momentum. And Joel Marty just failing to fire, ultimately. And Brisbane's defense just had the answers all night, like for Sydney's tall forwards. And ultimately, the Lions were just able to grind out a nice win at the SCG and basically confirm to the competition, no premiership hangover here. We are fighting to stay. And that is exactly what they did. Massive win for them. And they have West Coast next week, which, I mean, should be another win if you look at what the Eagles did this week. Whereas Sydney have to try and avoid 0-2 because opening round doesn't really count against Freo. I'm not really losing sleep on Sydney, but I still think they'll be fine, but they have to beat Freo this week to really confirm that, like, it isn't panic stations going around here and that there isn't a potential hangover after the blowout they had last year in the grand final. But ultimately, big win for Brisbane. Alright, next game is on Saturday night, Collingwood v Port Adelaide. Some teams in Collingwood's real opening game, but if you want to use the narrative of opening rounds, some teams, they will have to respond after a horrific round one of how you respond. And I said this off-season that I thought Dan Houston would be the connecting piece to just be that Nathan Murphy type facilitator and get like the 2023 Pies mojo back after a pretty down 2024. One game sample size. I'm feeling pretty good about that prediction early. This looks like the 2023 Pies back at full flight, and it was phenomenal to see. It was manic pressure all over the ground, hunt for the ball, fast forward 50 entries, and it didn't matter who marked it, Tim Membry, Brody Myercheck, or even Brandon Maynard who got some goals. They were just being calm, collected, and kicking whatever they needed with just manic pressure and fun, fast entries. And the crowd just got involved. Like, in my opinion, there isn't a better sight in football than this Collingwood team at full flight in their game plan and play style, and that's what we saw on Saturday night. If they play like this against other teams in the competition, they are going to be a very hard beat throughout this season, and it looks like Dan Houston is the perfect plug and play option that they've been wanting. They did not look all too slow, that's for sure. But for Port Adelaide, like, there's been a lot of stress, a lot of build up, a lot of tension over the succession plan and everything that's going on there, but this game did not do a good job at toning down those affairs. As Port Adelaide they just looked slow. They were cramping in the last quarter. They were struggling big time, and it looked like at times that wasn't a playing group that wanted to play for Ken Hinkley. I know it's round one, but it builds the question, is there a better way to go over this coaching cycle? And the way they played, like Colwell looked good, but Port Adelaide also played without pressure, without might, and they're bottom of the ladder after one round, so they have a lot to respond to, which they just need to against Richmond, because if they play like that against the Tigers, they probably will lose, and then the full-on blowtorch will hit Ken Hinkley. So overall, like Collingwood with a massive win, and they've now set themselves up. They have the Bulldogs on next Friday night. They play like that again. I think they'll win. Alright, final game of Super Saturday, and it will be North Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs. Now, the Bulldogs had a lot of injuries heading into this game, and a lot of men out the park. Treloar, Bontempelli, the other two big ones that they were missing. And it was like 6 players. It was an insane list, and it really became a next man up mentality. North Melbourne with a new play style, phenomenal off-season recruits, Caleb Daniel, Luke Parker, Jack Darling, all making their debut in the blue and white stripes. George Warmore, Harry Cheezel looking to facilitate their play, and I actually tipped North Melbourne in this one. I really thought they could get the job done. However, the Bulldogs, next man up mentality was a real thing. Latham Vanderveer was massive in just crumbing and scoring goals. Ed Richards got 30 disposals in insane effort, and Rory Long continued his renaissance in defense and was a brick wall in that department. And I just thought North Melbourne, they had a score and they had some promising players, but overall the Dogs were more cleaner by foot, cleaner on possession, and just never looked like they were going to drop this game. And the next man up mentality was just perfect for them. And getting a win like that early with all their players out puts them in a massive position. If they can just get, be 3-3 up at round 6 of all their injuries, they've put themselves in a massive position to challenge the Western Bulldogs. And they passed step 1 on that, beating North Melbourne, who, whilst they did put up a score, still showed a little bit of worrying signs, and signs that there's still a little bit that loser mentality and struggling mentality going on about them that they really need to fix. Their defense should have been a lot better than it was, but they just let Vanderveer and so many other Dogs forwards, Aaron Rawson as well with 3 goals, just go rampant, unfortunately. So their defense, it's one to watch, and it's a bitter pill to swallow for the Kangaroos, because they really thought they were ready to win a game like this. So yeah, overall, bit of pill to swallow. I'm not fully down on them yet. I'm excited to see how they go next week against Melbourne to really judge them. But for the Bulldogs, promising signs, promising early win in round 1. Alright, now heading into the Super Sunday slate of games, we begin with St Kilda versus Adelaide, and I tipped the Adelaide Crows here. I thought it was going to be a nice, I thought it was going to be a tight game because Adelaide is sometimes like that, but I tipped the Crows here. It wasn't a confident tip, but I tipped the Crows. I might be confidently tipping the Crows in more games after this performance, because there was this sense of Crow arrogance that was back. This sense of just South Australia dominance that we haven't seen from the Adelaide Crows in the last few years. It felt back in this game. Their midfield was just rolling. Their recruits in Peatling, Neil Bullen were just phenomenal. Jordan Dawson is back to winning the Brownlow according to everyone else, but the big one was Riley Philthorpe, who finally looks like the genuine. And overall, the Crows, like ball movement and overall like play style just looked so much more funner, more succinct, more exciting. Granted, St Kilda did not look that good, and like it will be interesting to see like how they do it against a like more legitimate opposition as St Kilda. Aside from Jack Higgins, they looked bland, vanilla, and did not look like they would know how to score at any point throughout this game. But the Crows were just sensational. I tipped them as a bold tip to make the 8. I'm feeling a lot more vindified about that overall tip after one game. So yeah, hopefully the Crows can continue to prove me right because they looked extremely solid. Alright, we head to the MCG for the final time of the round for the next game. Melbourne v GWS. And good thing I'm recording this on St Patrick's Day because this was the inaugural Jims game. A game dedicated to Jimmy Stynes, a true trailblazer and icon for many football fans who trailblazed the path of not only ruckman, but also Irish-born players and international players to play Australian rules football. So it was phenomenal from that perspective. And it was also great to see Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver back in Melbourne jerseys and against a formidable GWS team that pants Collingwood last week in the opening round. Melbourne looked solid for 3 quarters. Like their debutants were putting on a great show. I thought Aidan Johnson was a great pack mark. Xavier Lindsay was a phenomenal disposal getter and will continue to be an incredible player for them in the near future. And I just thought their overall like pressure and distinct defensive game plan was in structure. But on that game plan, a lot of people say that they thought Melbourne were moving the ball a lot quicker, a lot faster in this game. I didn't really see it that way. I thought the defense was back to what it was in 2020 and 2022 and 2023, but I thought that they weren't moving it fast enough to what the current meta states. If I were a Giants fan, I would have been incredibly annoyed with how this game was going. Melbourne were just grinding out so slowly, so securely, so boringly, and you just had to sit and watch as they were just cheesing you to all end throughout most of this game. So it would have been such a hard watch for GWS fans. But in the 4th quarter, my man Toby Green stepped it up big time for the Giants. He was phenomenal. Just every disposal he got just looked like an overall score, and he dragged this team back into the game when it looked like Caleb Windsor and so many other young Melbourne players were going to take this from them. And overall, Finn Callaghan continued to be a monster disposal getter. And even in the 4th quarter, I could just tell that Melbourne were going to lose this game. Because they were just bombing it long inside 50 every time, and they were just not threatening to score. And I knew GWS had one more goal in them in this game. And I thought that Melbourne could have done so much better with their inside 50s, but that's been the story for the last few years about them just panicking in late situations. Ultimately, Aidan Johnson got the kick to win, and people are saying he could have handballed it to the next guy, but he's a young player. I wouldn't really criticise him for this. Although Melbourne's defense could have been a lot better on the next entry, overall led to Lockie Keefe's goal and the Giants being able to steal this game. Phenomenal job by him, always good. He's been a journeyman, been a good servant at many clubs, including Collingwood, and it was great to see him be able to kick that game winner. And ultimately, the Giants, despite being challenged, despite being put in a grinding Melbourne game throughout the whole affair, are able to come away with the win. Overall, they would be feeling very positive about themselves as they head into a bye. Melbourne, their debut showed signs. A lot to work on with late game situations still, but their debuts, especially Xavier Lindsay, showed incredible signs that they are going to be stars. As they head into an interesting game against North Melbourne next week. Just one more thing I want to point out. Before I go on this one, the crowd. 23,000 at the MCG for a decent Sunday afternoon. It wasn't decent, it was wet, but still. 23,000. If you watched the game, half the stadium looked empty. I've just been holding it on for the last couple of times this happened. I want to really point it out right now. It baffles me and it really annoys me when Melbourne fans keep doing this. Like, if you keep doing this, you don't deserve to have full MCG rights. You should be playing at Marvel Stadium for all I care if you're going to start doing it, keep doing this. And it keeps showing us why I think Melbourne fans are the worst, most, fair weather fans in football. Because, they just don't show up. There were more groundskeeper stuff at this game. And it was just pathetic from them to see. And I will point it out every time it happens. Because if you have MCG rights, actually fill that bloody stadium up. Or else give it to a team that actually deserves it, like Carlton or the rest of them. Alright, final game of the day. West Coast v Gold Coast in a battle of the coast. And in the first game in a jersey that I'm not really that big of a fan of, the Suns proved they might be rising up and have much brighter days on the horizon. First game in the new jersey and they win by the biggest amount they have ever won by. Ben King was a just titan in the forward square and had I think the best forward performance of the round with 6 goals and was other players were key as well. Ben Long got so many critical goals. Noah Anderson in his first game racked up a ton of disposals. Matt Rowell looked great. Bailey Humphrey Jackson's this Suns team has so much promise and so much depth, and they'll only have more coming back with Leo Lombard and Mac Andrew, who you know I'm a fan of, coming in as well. So it's all there for the Suns, and they proved if they can keep up performances like this, maybe, just maybe, it might finally be time for finals football. But it's the best start they could have asked for. John Noble and Dan Rioli looked amazing as new recruits, and they will be feeling very positive. A little bit of the 2017 Tigers about how they played this, with how they tacked off turnover as well. And Jared Witts was utterly phenomenal as well. Big ups for the Gold Coast Suns. For West Coast, could not have had a worse start to the season. Harley Reid looked puzzled, he looked tough. I felt the Suns got into him and he didn't respond correctly. Their new recruits could have not stood up as well as they could have, and their defense, oh man, it needs to improve. I think they've got decent spots on the forward line and midfield, but their defense needs to improve. It's one of the worst in the competition. And it showed as Ben King and Ben Long were just given way too easy access to goals. And if it's gonna play like that, then it might be a pretty long year for the West Coast Eagles again. And then the questions about Harley Reid potentially come up next season. Not the way they wanted to start this one off. And again, almost the opposite of the Melbourne crowd. Do not point out crowd numbers again. 46,000 for a team that isn't expected to really perform this year or do much this year. West Coast fans are some of the most die-hard, loyal, passionate fans in the game. They can be annoying when they're up and about, but I bloody respect them for continuing to show up for this team. Big ups to the Eagles fan base. So yeah, overall, that was a pretty solid weekend wrap for the opening round of the season. Many opening statements made, and we'll just see if they keep up. And for the teams who lost badly, we'll see if they can respond.